Dad's silent revenge.
The moment my wife Linda stood up at our Christmas dinner table and announced she was taking control of all our finances, I knew she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But I didn't say a word. I just sat there, watching her smile, that confident smile she'd been practicing for months, and quietly reached for my coffee cup. My name is Harold Patterson. I'm 67 years old, and that night changed everything. We were sitting in the dining room of our house on Maple Street in Dearborn, Michigan. You know, the kind of neighborhood, working folks, retired Ford and GM people, houses built solid back when they made things to last. Snow was coming down outside, and Linda had gone all out with the decorations. Red tablecloth, fancy china she'd bought somewhere, candles flickering. My son Gary was there with his girlfriend, Sarah, along with Linda's sister Janet and her husband Rick. Linda had been acting strange all week. More confident than usual, she kept making comments about planning for the future and making sure everything was organized. I figured it was just holiday stress. I was wrong. She tapped her wine glass with a fork and the room went quiet. Linda's got this way about her: when she wants attention, she straightens up, puts on what I call her professional voice, and suddenly everyone's looking at her. At 48, she still carries herself like the insurance claims adjuster she used to be before we got married 2 years ago. I want to say something before we have dessert. She started standing there in her new red dress. Harold and I have been talking a lot about getting older, about making sure we're prepared for whatever comes next. I hadn't been talking about any such thing, but I kept my mouth shut. That's why I've decided to take over managing our household finances. All of them. She looked around the table like she was announcing something wonderful. Harold's worked so hard all these years, and now it's time for him to relax and not worry about money anymore. Gary shifted in his chair. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. Linda reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I've already taken care of the first step. This morning I had Harold's credit cards canceled. It's really for the best. At his age, he shouldn't have to deal with all that responsibility. The words hit the table like a hammer. She kept smiling while she said it, like she was doing me some kind of favor. "If you need anything, honey," she said, looking directly at me, "you just ask me first. I'll make sure all the bills get paid and everything stays organized." Janet nodded. "That's smart thinking, Linda. My mother got confused about money near the end." Rick added, "Good for you for being proactive." I looked at my son. Gary was staring down at his plate, clearly uncomfortable but not saying a word. That hurt more than anything Linda had done. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Then I set the cup down and looked right at my wife. "Linda," I said quietly, "you really don't know who you married, do you?" Her smile faltered just a little. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stood up and walked to the kitchen where I'd left my cell phone charging. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Victor, it's Harold. Can you come over now? Bring the documents we discussed." When I came back to the dining room, Linda was frowning. "Harold, what's going on?" "Who was that?" "My attorney," I said, sitting back down. "He'll be here in 20 minutes. The room went completely silent. You could hear the old furnace kicking on in the basement. "Your attorney?" Linda's voice went up an octave. "Harold, you're scaring me." "What attorney?" Gary finally spoke up. "Dad, what's this about?" I looked at my son, this good kid I'd raised mostly on my own after his mother, Dorothy, died of cancer 8 years ago. Gary was 35 now, worked as a network administrator for a small tech company downtown. He meant well, but he'd never really understood money or business. Neither had Dorothy, bless her soul. That was always my department. "Gary," I said, "how much do you think your old man is worth?" He looked confused. "I don't know, Dad. You never really talked about money much. I figured you had your pension and Social Security, maybe some savings." Linda was getting agitated. "Harold, stop this. You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I turned to look at her. "You canceled my credit cards this morning without asking me. You announced to my family that you're taking control of my money, and you did all this because you think I'm some helpless old man who can't handle his own affairs." The doorbell rang. I got up to answer it. Victor Reynolds has been my attorney for 15 years. He's about my age, retired from a big firm downtown, but he still handles a few select clients. He walked in carrying a leather briefcase, nodded politely to everyone, and set his case on the dining room table. "Good evening," he said. "I'm Victor Reynolds, Harold's attorney." Linda was staring at the briefcase like it might explode. "I don't understand what's happening here." Victor opened the case and pulled out a thick folder. "Mrs. Patterson, your husband asked me to prepare some documents that might clear up any confusion about his financial situation." He spread several papers across the table. Bank statements, property deeds, stock certificates, patent documents. Harold Patterson currently owns 3 rental properties in the Dearborn and Detroit area, with a combined value of approximately $800,000. He also holds a diversified investment portfolio worth $1 million. Linda sat down hard in her chair. Her face had gone white. Victor continued, "Additionally, Mr. Patterson holds 4 patents related to automotive fuel injection systems developed during his 32-year career at Ford Motor Company. These patents currently generate monthly royalty payments averaging $400–500. Gary's jaw had dropped. "Dad, is this real? It gets better," Victor said. He pulled out another document. Mr. Patterson also owns a 35% stake in Bennett Industrial Services, a parts supply company he invested in 18 years ago. Current annual dividends from this investment total approximately $42,000. The room was dead quiet, except for the sound of Linda's rapid breathing. Total monthly income from all sources is approximately $12,000. Total net worth is $2.8 million. Linda finally found her voice. That's impossible. We live in this little house. You drive that old pickup truck. You shop at Walmart. I looked at my wife, this woman I'd married 2 years ago, because I was lonely and she seemed like good company. Linda had been working as an insurance claims adjuster when we met, making decent money but nothing special. She'd been divorced twice and had some credit card debt she was always worried about. "Linda, just because I have money doesn't mean I need to spend it foolishly. I've been driving that pickup for 12 years because it runs fine. I shop at Walmart because why would I pay more for the same stuff somewhere else?" Gary was shaking his head. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me about this?" "Because I wanted you to make your own way. Your mother Dorothy and I agreed on that. We wanted you to work hard, learn the value of a dollar, become your own man. We didn't want you sitting around waiting for an inheritance. Dorothy and I had talked about this plenty of times before the cancer took her. We both grew up with nothing. My dad worked at River Rouge for 35 years and never owned anything but the clothes on his back. Dorothy's family was the same way. When I started making real money from those patents, we agreed that Gary needed to learn to stand on his own feet first." I turned back to Linda. "But you, honey, you saw an old man you thought you could control. You figured I was just some retired factory worker with a pension and a little savings. Easy pickings." Her face was red now. "That's not. I was trying to help. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From my own money?" Victor cleared his throat. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Patterson. This morning, when you canceled your husband's credit cards, you committed a form of financial elder abuse. Those cards were in his name alone. You had no legal authority to cancel them." Linda's eyes went wide. I was on the accounts. I thought I could. Being an authorized user doesn't give you the right to cancel the primary cardholder's credit. Fortunately, Harold contacted the banks this afternoon. All the cards have been restored, and you've been removed as an authorized user. I watched my wife's face as the reality sank in. She hadn't just failed to take control of my finances. She'd completely misunderstood who she was dealing with. The thing is, I saw this coming. Not the exact details, but I could tell Linda was getting ideas. Little comments here and there about how I should let her handle the paperwork or how I was getting forgetful about bills I'd never forgotten in my life. She'd started opening my mail saying she was just trying to help organize things. She'd ask questions about my accounts that seemed innocent enough, but they weren't really innocent. Last month, she suggested I should add her as a joint owner on my checking account, just in case something happens. When I said no, she got this look on her face. Not angry exactly, but calculating. That's when I called Victor and asked him to prepare everything we'd need if this situation got worse. Harold. Linda said quietly, "I made a mistake. I'm sorry, Linda. You didn't make a mistake. You made a calculation. You calculated that I was weak and confused and easy to manipulate. You were wrong." Janae and Rick were sitting there looking like they wanted to disappear into the floor. They'd been nodding along with Linda's plan just a few minutes ago, thinking they were witnessing responsible adult children taking care of an aging parent. Now they realized they'd been watching something else entirely. Gary spoke up, "Dad, what happens now?" I looked at my son, then at Linda, then around the table at her family who were all staring at their plates. "Now we figure out whether this marriage has any honest foundation or whether it was just about what you thought you could get from me." Linda started crying then. Not the angry crying she did when she didn't get her way, but real tears. "Harold, please, I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I do love you. Maybe you do, Linda. But love doesn't give you the right to lie to me, manipulate me, or try to steal my independence. And that's what you did tonight. You tried to steal my independence." The patents Victor mentioned weren't just lucky breaks. I'd been working on fuel injection improvements since the early 1980s, back when most people thought carburetors were good enough. I spent my own time, my own money filing applications and working with patent attorneys. Ford wasn't interested at first. Then fuel efficiency standards got tighter, and suddenly my designs were worth something. The rental properties came later. I started with one duplex in 1995, fixed it up myself on weekends, rented it out, used the income to buy another one, then another. Nothing fancy, just solid working-class neighborhoods where people needed decent places to live at reasonable prices. Victor started gathering up his documents. Harold, if you need anything else, call me. Mrs. Patterson, I'd suggest you speak with your own attorney about your situation. After Victor left, the rest of the family made their excuses and got out of there pretty quickly. Linda went upstairs crying. Gary and I sat in the living room, not saying much for a while. Dad, Gary finally said, I'm sorry I didn't speak up. When Linda said those things about you being too old to handle money, I should have said something. Son, you didn't know. How could you? I never told you about the money because I didn't want it to change how you saw yourself or your future. But I should have told you enough so you'd know not to let someone disrespect me like that. Gary nodded. What are you going to do about Linda? I honestly don't know yet. She's got a choice to make. She can apologize sincerely, get some counseling to figure out why she thought what she did was okay, and maybe we can work through this. Or she can keep believing that she was justified because I'm old and she knows better. If it's the second option, she'll be talking to a divorce attorney pretty soon. The next few weeks were tough. Linda tried apologizing, then got angry when I didn't immediately forgive her, then tried apologizing again. She wanted everything to go back to the way it was, but I couldn't unknow what I now knew about her. We went to counseling. Dr. Martinez was a nice enough woman, probably about Linda's age, and she tried to stay neutral. But when she pressed Linda on why she didn't discuss the credit card situation with me first, why she went behind my back, why she made the announcement in front of everyone like it was already decided, Linda couldn't give good answers. I thought Harold would resist. Linda said during one session, I thought if I presented it as something that was already happening, he'd just accept it. But why did you think Harold needed you to manage his finances? Dr. Martinez asked. Linda got flustered. He's 67 years old. People that age, they get confused, they make mistakes. I was trying to protect him. Has Harold shown signs of confusion or made financial mistakes that concerned you? Long pause. Well, no, not exactly, but it's just a matter of time. That's when I knew we were done. Linda wasn't sorry about what she'd done. She was sorry it didn't work. The truth was simpler than she wanted to admit. She saw an opportunity to control someone she thought was weaker than her, and she took it. The only thing she was sorry about was that it didn't work. I started thinking back to our courtship, looking for signs I'd missed. Linda had been charming, attentive, seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. But now I wondered if she'd been calculating the whole time. She'd asked a lot of questions about my work, my retirement plans, what kind of life I wanted to live. At the time, I thought she was just getting to know me. Now, I wondered if she was doing research. She'd been impressed by the house on Maple Street, even though it's nothing fancy. Built in 1962, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, basement, 2-car garage. Good, solid construction, but not what you'd call luxurious. Dorothy and I bought it in 1985 when Gary was little, and I'd kept it up well over the years. New roof in 2010, updated the electrical in 2015, refinished the hardwood floors myself during the pandemic. But Linda kept commenting on what a nice neighborhood it was, how stable everything seemed. She loved that I owned the house outright, no mortgage. At the time, I thought she appreciated security. Now I realized she was calculating equity. We separated in February. Linda moved in with her sister Janet, and I stayed in the house on Maple Street. We're still technically married, but I doubt that'll last much longer. The hardest part wasn't losing Linda. The hardest part was realizing how badly I'd misjudged her character. I'd been married to Dorothy for 28 years before the cancer took her. We knew each other inside and out. Dorothy never would have dreamed of trying to control my money, just like I never would have tried to control hers. We were partners. With Linda, I thought I was getting a companion for my later years, someone to travel with, someone to share meals with, someone to talk to in the evenings. What I got was someone who saw me as a retirement plan. Gary and I are closer now than we've been in years. I told him about his mother's life insurance money that's been sitting in a trust fund for him since she died. I told him about the college fund that paid for his education and the down payment I secretly provided for his first car. He wasn't mad about the secrets. If anything, he was grateful that I'd let him think he'd earned everything himself. Dad, he said one day when we were working on his car in my garage, I think I understand now why you lived the way you did. The money didn't make you feel rich. It made you feel responsible. He was right. Having money when you grew up without it doesn't make you feel powerful, it makes you feel careful. You remember what it was like to worry about every dollar so you don't get careless just because you don't have to worry anymore. My father worked at River Rouge from 1952 to 1987, never missed a day unless he was sick, never owned a new car in his life, never took a vacation that cost more than a tank of gas. When he died, he left my mother about $8,000 in savings and a paid-off house worth maybe $30,000. She lived on Social Security and his small pension until she passed in 2003. I swore I'd do better than that, not because I wanted to live fancy, but because I wanted security. Real security, the kind where unexpected medical bills or car repairs don't keep you awake at night. The kind where you can help your kids without going into debt yourself. That's something Linda never understood. She saw money as power, as a way to control things and people. I saw it as responsibility, something to be protected and used wisely. These days I'm doing fine. I still drive my old pickup truck, still shop at Walmart, still live in the same house I've been in for almost 40 years. But I'm more careful about who I let into my life. I learned that keeping quiet about your business is smart, but keeping quiet when someone's trying to take advantage of you is dangerous. The divorce was finalized last month. Linda didn't get much. Michigan's a no-fault state. But when you've only been married 2 years and there's clear evidence of financial manipulation, the courts aren't very generous. She got her car, her personal belongings, and that's about it. No alimony, no claim on the house or the businesses. Victor made sure of that. I found out later that Linda had been in worse financial shape than I realized when we met. She owed about $35,000 on credit cards, had defaulted it on a car loan, and her sister Janet had been helping her make rent for almost a year. When Linda married me, she saw it as solving all her problems at once. The sad thing is, if she'd just been honest with me about her situation, I probably would have helped her. I'm not heartless. If someone I cared about was struggling with debt, we could have worked something out. But the deception, the manipulation, the assumption that I was too old and stupid to notice what she was doing, that's what I couldn't forgive. Gary brought his girlfriend Sarah over for dinner last Sunday. She's a nice girl, works as a nurse at Henry Ford Hospital, seems to genuinely care about Gary. We were sitting around the kitchen table after dinner, and Sarah asked me about the patents. Mr. Patterson, Gary told me, you invented some kind of fuel injection system that must have been exciting. Well, I said, I wouldn't call it exciting exactly. More like stubborn. I had ideas about how to make engines run cleaner and more efficiently, and I kept working on those ideas even when other people told me it wasn't worth the effort. The truth is, the patent process took years. I filed my first application in 1984, and it wasn't approved until 1987. Ford wasn't interested initially. They had their own engineering teams, their own ideas about how things should work. But when emission standards started getting tighter in the late 1980s and early 1990s, suddenly my designs became valuable. The royalties weren't huge at first, maybe $200 a month, enough to pay a utility bill. But as more manufacturers started using versions of my technology, the payments grew. By the time I retired from Ford in 2012, those patents were generating serious income. The thing about patents, I told Sarah, is they're like rental properties for ideas. You do the work once, and if the idea is good enough, it keeps paying you for years. Gary smiled. Dad always said the best investment is knowledge because nobody can take it away from you. That's something I learned from Carl Bennett, the guy who taught me about business when I was starting out with the rental properties. Carl had a small machine shop, and I used to repair equipment for him in the early 1980s. He was the first person to explain to me that working hard wasn't the same thing as working smart. Harold, he told me one day, you're good with your hands and you're good with machines. But if you really want to build something that lasts, you need to think about systems. You need to think about how to make money work for you instead of just working for money. Carl introduced me to his accountant, helped me understand depreciation and tax advantages, showed me how to read financial statements. When I bought that first duplex in 1995, Carl co-signed the loan because I didn't have enough credit history as an investor. He didn't have to do that, but he believed in me. Carl died 3 years ago. Lung cancer, same thing that got Dorothy. His funeral was packed with people whose lives he'd touched. Small business owners, young guys he'd mentored, families who'd rented properties from him over the years. That's the kind of legacy I want to leave. The whole experience with Linda taught me something I should have known already. Respect isn't something you get just because you're older or because you've been successful. It's something you have to insist on. And if someone in your life won't give it to you, maybe they don't belong in your life. I've been thinking about what Gary said about the money making me feel responsible instead of rich. It's true. Every month when those royalty checks come in, when the rent payments get deposited, when the dividend statements arrive, I don't think about what I can buy. I think about what I can protect. I'm protecting Gary's future, making sure he's got a safety net even if he never needs to use it. I'm protecting the memory of Dorothy, making sure the life we built together continues to matter. And I'm protecting myself, making sure I can stay independent as long as possible. Independence. That's what Linda really tried to steal from me. Not just my money, but my right to make my own decisions about my own life. She wanted to turn me into someone who needed permission to spend my own money, someone who had to ask for approval to live my own life. I'm 67 years old, I've got my health and my independence, and my son respects me. After what happened at Christmas, I know exactly what that's worth, and I know it's not for sale. Next week, Gary and Sarah are coming over to help me clean out the basement. Sarah wants to learn how to refinish furniture, and I've got some pieces down there that Dorothy and I collected over the years. It'll be good to see those things get used again, to pass along some skills to someone who wants to learn. That's what real wealth is, I think. Not just money in the bank, but knowledge you can share, relationships you can trust, and the ability to sleep soundly knowing you've lived with integrity. Linda never understood that. Maybe she will someday, but that's not my problem anymore. The people who try to control you rarely do it for your benefit. They do it because they believe you have something they want, and they think you're too weak to stop them from taking it. Real strength isn't about having money or power. It's about knowing your worth and never letting anyone convince you that you're less capable than you actually are, no matter what your age.